Crows circled around the gloomy and abandoned building. A hero in military camouflage approached the tied-up guy with a pistol in his hands. Looking at the weapon, he asked excitedly what he was going to do. But silence followed, and only the swing of a pistol broke the stillness of the moment. The hand was hit so hard that it started bleeding. The tied-up hero screamed that his arm hurt a lot. The man simply clicked his tongue in response, saying that he was a pathetic freak. It was Jian Shan, captain of the Dragon Force Special Forces, a man with the codename Lone Wolf. The man said that the boy had better confess, and then he would give him a quick death. Then a hand fell on the protagonist's shoulder. The colleague said that the captain should forget about it, and that his torture exceeded all acceptable standards. The man abruptly threw the guy's hand off and shouted that he didn't care about the rules, and did he really think that their comrades died in vain? This bastard is hiding in this building, and today the captain will definitely get him out of there. Grabbing the criminal by the hair, the protagonist ordered him to give the password to enter the upper floor. He added that if he says so, he will die painlessly. And now the heroes were already standing at the huge wooden doors. The man's hand began to enter the password abruptly, his fingers tapping the keys quickly and confidently. Jian Shan asked his colleague to cover for him. He abruptly kicked down the door and, raising his pistol, rushed forward. A man was sitting in a chair with a glass in his hands, and behind him were monitors from surveillance cameras. The hero said that he had been waiting for this meeting for a long time. The captain chuckled and said that young Master Chen really wanted to see him so much. Approaching menacingly forward, the man asked him if he was tired of life. He swore to catch him with his own hands and throw him to the dogs. The hero only grimaced in response, as if the enemy's words were not a threat to him, but empty noise. Chen chuckled, lowering his head, and said that Captain Jiang thought he had caught him. This angered the protagonist, and he asked what he was laughing at, adding that reinforcements would be here soon and he would not be able to escape. The man admitted that Captain Jiang was wrong, and he looked at him through his glass, calmly declaring that there would be no reinforcements. A pistol landed right on the back of the protagonist's head, and he froze. Then a familiar voice was heard quietly apologizing to the captain. The man stood up from his chair, saying that a man with muscles instead of brains would not understand that one can win without fighting. He will have something to think about in the afterlife. The protagonist became furious and shouted, calling him a freak. The captain turned sharply and grabbed his colleague by the arm, stopping his movement. Suddenly a shot rang out, which left the hero stupefied. He collapsed, only realizing that he had fallen into a carefully prepared trap from the very beginning. Blood streamed down his face, filling his eyes, and he realized that the trap had been set to destroy the dragon's power. And if I had known in advance, I would have shot that bastard without thinking. The captain's hand clenched into a fist, and he said that he had given his all and had fought evil all his life. But he still couldn't understand that real evil was right next to him all this time. The main character shouted that if he could start all over again, he would have destroyed everyone around him without thinking. The man's eyelids finally closed. Some voice called out to the man, bringing him out of his heavy thoughts. A stranger asked if the hero was okay. Jinshan turned around to look at him abruptly. He jumped back and, stumbling, shouted that he was not a pervert. He was just scared because the hero had been standing there alone for so long. The protagonist asked if he was a schoolboy, and he became indignant, declaring what kind of question that was and that he was, of course, a schoolboy. Jinshan grabbed the boy by the shoulders and demanded to know what year, day, and month it was. They told him that it was now April 13th, 2015, and advised him to go to the school psychologist. People looked at him, thinking he was strange, but the main character looked in the mirror for a long time, trying to comprehend what was happening. Had he really been reborn, he thought, looking at his reflection. And 10 years ago, too, the thought took his breath away. The guy slapped himself sharply. He grinned, despite the blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. After all, if the main character is alive, then all those creatures will have to die. Girls were walking down the corridor, discussing yesterday's concert and admiring the fact that Gigi, whom they called handsome, was there. Suddenly, one of them turned around, as if she felt someone's gaze on her. Her friends were indignant, telling Jian Shan that he was staring in vain, that they were talking not about him, but about Gigi. They were indignant, muttering that the hero was whispering something under his breath and blood was flowing from his mouth, and they called it disgusting. But the heroine still looked back after him. Today's date flashed through the protagonist's memories. Broken instruments stained with blood lay around. Something terrible happened that day. He remembers how the heroine lay covered in blood on the bathhouse floor. And since Jinshan decided to rewrite his life, he thought it would be a good idea to start with this. The girls at the bathhouse were saying that there was some kind of pervert hanging around at the school gates. The hero knocked on their door and called out quietly. Having asked permission to collect water here, He entered with a huge bottle and calmly said that there were some problems again in the main building. They were indignant, saying that something had happened again in this damn school and adding that the hero should not stare. The guy started collecting water and calmly replied that he couldn't do otherwise. Jianshan became wary, realizing that everything happened right here. The hero pursed his lips, exhaling in irritation at how long it took her to wash. The clock already read 13 hours, 15 minutes. A cry for help was heard in the corridor from the women's shower room, where the pervert was allegedly located. The main character realized that it had finally arrived. It was the very day he least wanted to remember. Those same hours, minutes, and seconds, there was fear in his eyes which he tried in vain to hide. After all, this moment determined his fate. In the past, a sex crime was committed on campus on this day. A man sneaked into the women's locker rooms and was spying on the girls, and when he was spotted, he panicked and ran away. He had a chance to stop the impending tragedy, but that evil face immediately came to mind, and the schoolboy simply fell into a stupor and fear, unable to take a single step. It turns out that fear became greater than his own strength. The hero wanted to cry then, and he could barely restrain himself. The criminal hid from pursuit in the showers and brutally raped the girl who was there. Later, that heroine transferred to another school, and no one heard about her again, and everyone quickly forgot about it. Jianshan carried this guilt with him for years, and eventually failed to finish school and joined the army. There he joined the special forces, trying to drown out his inner pain with service and constant workload. The hero was repeatedly reprimanded for excessive cruelty and violation of discipline. Hatred always burned like a bright flame in his heart. The main character could not understand how those moral freaks could live, who destroy other people's lives. Over time, Jianshan became known as a lone wolf. The heroines pointed to the fugitive and asked not to let him escape. The boy thought that after reincarnation, it would be logical to immediately go to Chen Shao and strangle him. Taking out a knife, the pervert shouted for no one to come near and demanded that everyone leave. The protagonist decided that he would like to get rid of the regrets of his past life. Grabbing the handle of the bottle, the guy declared that only violence would help against bastards like this. He took a swing and said that this time the pervert wouldn't succeed. Having let go of the bottle, the hero asked the girls to run to the side. And at that very moment, the object hit the man's head and broke. He howled in pain as the contents of the bottle turned out to be scalding hot. He barely opened his eyes, trying to make out the villain, and his gaze wandered. And then, in his pupils, Jianshan appeared, advancing forward. The hero jumped so high that all the girls opened their mouths, not believing that a person was even capable of such a leap. And suddenly he dealt a swift, precise blow to the pervert. So much so that he flew towards the door, hitting his back against it. He groaned, unable to immediately come to his senses, and the sound came out muffled. The guy calmly asked if he was still conscious, looking down at him. Calling for a fight, the protagonist said that he would have to train. Fear was evident in the man's gaze. Out of desperation, he swung the knife, screaming for the guy to die. Jianshan dodged with ease, moving so smoothly and quickly as if he had anticipated his opponent's every move. After which he just as easily grabbed the man's hand, forcing him to throw away the knife. The main character made a high kick. Jianshan hit the pervert, knocking out a couple of his teeth. The man fell to the floor, exhausted, and his breathing became heavy, as if his strength had completely left him. The protagonist glared at the man, his gaze filled with cold determination. There was some kind of madness in his eyes, and the guy screamed at him at the top of his lungs, calling the pervert a monster. Jianshan swung his hand, hitting the pervert. Then he struck 3, 5, 7 times without stopping. The enemy's face was already swollen, and the hero grabbed him by the hair, saying that no matter how much time passed, one look at that face makes his insides boil with anger. But Jianshan was distracted from his task by a female voice addressing him. The protagonist raised his eyes, slightly stunned. A girl sat in front of him wearing just a towel and said that if he continued to beat him, it would not take long to kill him. The guy took a closer look and realized that he was not mistaken. It was definitely her. The heroine brought her legs together and looked away slightly. He said that he was her savior, but asked her not to look at her like that. After all, such a situation really embarrasses the girl. The police lights flashed, cutting through the silence with a sharp flash of light. The man was being detained, and he told the officer that he wanted to go to the toilet. The heroes watched this, and one of the officers addressed the guy. The officer noted that he handcuffed the criminal like a pro and asked if he had practiced. The main character replied that he had seen something like this on TV. The man grinned and said he didn't remember any Boy Scout programs teaching how to use handcuffs. The officer's hand acquired a grip. He moved forward. Then what about this? Speaking the words slowly and confidently. and he got closer and closer, asking if they show this on TV. Jianshan's eyes glowed red, and he quietly said the word, "officer," asking if he was going to strangle a civilian. The man warily thought that the guy was emitting a murderous aura, and seriously wondered who he was. The woman's hand grabbed the shirt, and the heroine said that Jianshan was not guilty of anything. She said she could confirm it because that bastard was the one who pulled out the knife first. The heroine winked at her savior, and a quiet gratitude flashed in her gesture. And the main character just looked at her embarrassedly. The large window of the old gray building was filled with light. The guy hesitantly reached for the handle, sighing heavily. He entered the kitchen and quietly told his mother that he was back. The mother answered him that her son still remembered where his home was and asked if he realized what time it was. She was indignant that he didn't even bring a bag home and what kind of student he was becoming. The older he gets, the worse he behaves, and the only gratitude he has is that his father spoiled him. The protagonist silently hugged his mother, and her indignation immediately began to melt away. The woman asked worriedly what had happened and whether someone had offended him. Looking at the table with food, the guy mentally asked himself not to cry. The woman sat down at the table opposite him and asked him if he was acting strange today and if he was feeling okay. The boy replied that his mother shouldn't worry and that he was fine. And he quietly added that from now on he would obey her and promised to do so. She laughed and said that he and obedience to mom were incompatible things. The woman added that they don't expect much from their son and that he just needs to finish school. Looking out the window, the protagonist thought that she often grumbled like this when she was alive, and that it was a wonderful feeling. Jianshan lay on the bed and thought that he missed this time so much. To maintain simple happiness, ordinary people need to sacrifice everything they have, but evil people can easily destroy it. Clenching his hand into a fist, he firmly decided that life had given him a second chance, and now he was going to change the world. The main character would like to die without regret. The next morning took the boy to school. The girls whispered about him, noting that he looked attractive if you looked closely, and that he fought so bravely. The teacher gave him a thumbs up and said that Jianshan was a good boy and that the principal would reward him. The main character looked tired because he didn't expect this. Could someone's rescue really cause so much noise? The boy walked into the classroom and everyone started talking in hushed tones, claiming he had been kicking the door and that his fists were as heavy as sandbags. A bald classmate ran up to him and, beaming with delight, said that Shan had amazing punches, like Jackie Chan. The hero calmly replied that if he wanted, he could teach him. Suddenly there was the sound of a pen hitting a desk, and the classroom immediately became quieter. A classmate said it was just a normal fight. He slammed the table and continued that Jianshan hadn't won a competition to be praised like that. Looking up, the protagonist calmly asked what the headman needed. The class monitor stated that yesterday's English homework was mandatory and that he was the only one in the class who had not turned it in. Taking the folder out of his backpack, he quietly muttered that the class president himself had come to take his homework from him. As he handed over the homework, others whispered, calling him a benefactor. Then the headman's low, angry growl was heard, and the conversations around immediately died down. He tore up the folder and coldly said that the work was not formatted correctly. He ordered Jianshan to redo everything immediately. The torn work fell onto the desk, scattering into uneven pieces of paper. The bald classmate became indignant and shouted that Yan Tianli had gone completely crazy and why he had torn up his homework. The class monitor didn't even flinch and coldly said that the boy would rewrite the work 10 times and hand it in after school. The bald man couldn't stand it and, jumping up, shouted that they were asking for it. The bully barked that the bald monkey did not dare interrupt the class monitor, and a heavy silence fell over the class. Standing up and placing his hand on his classmate's shoulder, Jianshan calmly said that he would rewrite the homework. And looking angrily at the headman, he said that he should apologize. With a grin, the headman asked what he needed to apologize for. Throwing aside his torn work, the protagonist shouted out his rotten behavior. His bodyguard's eyes turned black with anger. He raised his fist and ordered them to watch their language. The protagonist quickly stepped aside, avoiding the blow and causing the bodyguard to lose his balance. He turned around and said that he dodged, as if not believing what had happened. A girl entered the classroom, humming something under her breath. Her eyes widened sharply, as if she saw something completely unexpected. And indeed, a thug was running quickly towards her. The protagonist gritted his teeth, wondering what the best course of action would be. He jumped up from his place, running closer to the heroine. Jianshan managed to grab her hand at the last seconds and dodged the blow. He asked his crying classmate if she was hurt. Whimpering, she said that nothing serious had happened and that it was just a bruise. The main character became completely gloomy and said that they had gone too far. The guy grabbed the big guy by the arm and muttered that he didn't need a hand that harmed the defenseless. At that very moment, the thug's arm was pierced by a sharp pain, as if someone had squeezed the muscles from the inside with an iron vise. He grabbed his arm, crying out in pain, as if he didn't understand what was happening to him. The headman grabbed a chair, shouting that Jianshan was a bastard. The main character suddenly turned around and ran towards Yan Tianli, and he grabbed him tightly by the throat. He pressed his classmate tighter and tighter, and then he made a sharp swing with his hand, clenching his hand into a fist. Behind them, a question was heard asking what was going on here and that this was already out of the question. The man noted that Jianshan was now addicted to beating people and that he should behave like that at home. The heroine started whining and told the teacher that they started it. The teacher shouted for everyone to be quiet and told the protagonist to come with him, and the class monitor chuckled. In the disciplinary room, he was asked how he managed to fight with Yan Tianli. The protagonist asked if he should just endure being approached. The man explained that his father is a big shot and even the director is afraid to touch the headman. He sighed and added that he knew how the blood of young people boils. But the main character should still go and write an explanatory note, and then behave well. The main character walked on the grass. He looked up at the swirling leaves and asked, "Be patient, yes. If a tree wants peace, what will it do if the wind doesn't stop blowing?" Seeing Jianshan in the doorway, his classmates shouted that he was back. Everyone started admiring him, calling him a hero and saying that he had taught him a good lesson. The guy was gratefully handed a bottle of water. The main character, embarrassed, replied that it wasn't worth it. The thug watched this scene angrily. He slammed his fist on the desk and said that Jianshan had taken over all the attention again. The brute asked the headman if they would really swallow it and suggested gathering the kids to deal with him after school. The hero calmly replied that it was not necessary and that he had acted impulsively. Admiration for brute force is just common behavior for lower life forms. Looking back at the boy, the headman said that there are rules in this world, and those who know how to use them become rulers. A quiet hello was heard on the line. The guy said he needed Uncle Zhao for one question. Namely, what should he do if he suddenly wants to send someone to a juvenile detention center? There was a noisy bustle in the classroom during recess. The guy shouted loudly, "Kaya!" He waved his leg, and the main character calmly asked him not to overdo it. Otherwise, he would tear his ligaments. A girl in a short skirt entered the classroom and quietly apologized. The heroes looked back in her direction. It was Ling Shi, and she was asking if Jianshan was perhaps in this class. Everyone around was whispering that she was even more charming than they said. The classmate was indignant and said that the main character was worth something since she came specifically to him. He said it was about that incident and asked if he was free after school today. The girl handed over her business card and said that it was her father's business card and that he would like to thank him personally. The protagonist froze, realizing that Lin Jiangbang was indeed the youngest major general who was respected in the army. But due to one incident, he resigned. Returning the business card, the guy said that he considers it his duty to fight evil. He turned around and said to convey this to Captain Lin, and that there was no need to honor him. Baldy asked Jianshan what Ling Si wanted, and the protagonist replied that her father wanted to make him his son-in-law. The headman turned to the boy and waited for his reaction, and he said that the director wanted to see him right now. The man shouted that if Han Chong died, he would become a murderer. The protagonist read the sheet and was surprised that, despite the diagnosis of traumatic brain injury, the ink on it had not even had time to dry yet. The director slammed the table and said that he really doubted the authenticity of the medical report. Jianshan remembered that he hadn't even touched Han Chong's head, and he decided that this was the work of Yang Tianli. The man shouted at him not to be silent and said that everything was written here in black and white. He hovered over him and said that then he could visit Han Chun in the hospital right now and find out whether he was at fault or whether there was a mistake in the paperwork. He told the director that he advised him not to interfere and asked why he was so sure that the whole world was in the hands of Yang Tianli's father. There was a noise outside the door, and the man thought he was a smart bastard. The police burst into the office and announced that Jianshan was suspected of deliberate assault. The police demanded that he accompany them to clarify the circumstances. The headman chuckled and said that he had decided to play with him and that he could not afford it. The main character snorted and said that the headman shouldn't get cocky because the show was just beginning. The guy was already in the interrogation room, and they were shouting there that Han Chong had 3 broken ribs. The investigator pointed to the paper and said that the medical certificate stated this, demanding a confession. The thin man demanded to know why he had treated his classmates so cruelly. Jianshan crossed his arms and said that instead of wasting energy on interrogating him, they should check Han Jung's phone first, and the main character himself won't say a word without his lawyer. He looked around and noticed that they didn't even have their cameras turned on and that they didn't have an arrest warrant. They were not dressed according to regulations. They did not show IDs, and there were a lot of procedural errors. The policeman whispered to his colleague who this guy was and how he knew so much. Jian Shan said that he was waiting for their boss because maybe at least he knew the rules. A silhouette appeared in the doorway and declared that the rules did not apply to everyone. It was the chief of police, Don Lee. He handed over a piece of paper and demanded that the guy simply sign a confession since he had crossed the wrong people. Then they said they would try to reduce his sentence to 3 years. The protagonist chuckled softly and said that they were sucking up to Tianli's father, and then added that he could guess the reason. The man is only a deputy chief and seems to want to move up the career ladder. The protagonist chuckled and said that with such methods it would be painful for him to fall, and fat would also splash everywhere. Don Lee yelled at him to shut up and said he needed to wash his mouth out with soap. Grabbing the schoolboy by the tie, the man asked him if he really thought he wouldn't risk acting against him. A policeman appeared in the doorway and announced that the chief was receiving a call from the Eastern Directorate. The hero slowly let go of his tie and was taken aback. Jian Shan coldly told him to go and answer the phone, adding that he himself would not go anywhere. The man gritted his teeth and wondered why they were calling. Was it really because of this guy? The protagonist grinned and asked if he really wasn't going to pick up the phone. A shout came over the line demanding that he be released immediately, emphasizing that this was an order. The deputy chief muttered uncertainly, "Well, it's according to the rules." 2 soldiers burst through the door, and one of them clicked his tongue in irritation, calling him an idol. It was Ling Zhangbang's subordinate, Staff Officer He Changshan. The deputy shouted, asking who gave them the right to break in, adding that it was against the rules. The soldier angrily stated that he was annoyed and that he was only capable of talking about rules. Putting the gun to his temple, the hero calmly said that these are his rules. Footsteps were heard outside the door, and the sound was getting closer. They came into the interrogation room and said that Officer He should take a look because the boy was here and he was alive and well. The officer asked why he was arrested, and the policeman nervously said it was a misunderstanding. The main character thought that although it was late, they still made it in time. A little earlier, Jian Shan asked a classmate that if he was gone for a long time, he should call the number on the piece of paper. The boy chuckled to himself, thinking that if he had been less careful, the fast Tianli would have caught him on the hook. The soldier handed over the papers and briefly asked them to sign the documents and let the boy go. As he signed the papers, the man thought gloomily that this psycho had actually pulled out a gun at the police station. Handing over the documents, the man thought that even the Yang family could be dealt with. The Lin family's influence in the capital was truly enormous. And if this guy has an army behind him, then jokes are bad, and now you need to figure out how to improve your relationship with him. The car was speeding along the road, and a question was asked of the staff officer, whether he had indeed exceeded his authority when he took out his weapon. The hero was indignant, said that the gun was not loaded, there was no excess, and ordered to look at the road. He then turned to the boy and said that he was Jian Shan, right? And that they were grateful to him for saving their captain's daughter. They shook hands, deciding that they were now even. The soldier noticed that little Shi spoke of him as a very skilled guy. He squeezed the boy's hand tighter, wondering how much. The protagonist did not lose his composure and asked if Mr. He really just wanted to test him. He waved his hand and calmly said that he was just curious. Jian Shan quickly dodged the blow, and when he began to attack the man, he laughed that he could do the same. The driver watched them in the mirror, and the officer remarked that the knee strike in such a tight space was impressive. Suddenly, the driver's eyes widened and he said that things were bad. After all, there was a military patrol ahead of them, and this information stunned the heroes. The man said, "Thank you for your service," opening the window slightly. They both exhaled, and the main character thought that he was worrying for nothing, since it would not be him who would have to write the report. Ahead stood a light, modern building with a flat roof and a neat balcony on the top floor. Opening the door, the officer said that the captain was waiting upstairs. As soon as the guy walked forward, the soldier began to shake. He asked a colleague to bring him some painkillers. Meanwhile, the guy walked forward. He entered the room, turning to Mr. Lin to get his attention. The man said that he must be Jian Shan and that they had finally met. While he was pouring tea, the main character thanked him. The man stopped the main character and said that he should thank him himself. After all, Lingxi was his only daughter, and if it weren't for Jian Shan, the man would feel obligated to her. The guy said he was overrated and that he did what any honest citizen should. The soldier smiled and said that the guy had attacked an armed thug and that he admired his bravery. And then he handed the folder to the main character and asked him to take a look. The guy read aloud that the district vice head, Mr. Yang, had recently gotten out of hand. The main character also saw a photo of the headman and his father there. Mr. Lin stated that if a tree's roots are in the way of walking, they should be cut off. The soldier continued that it was not to say that the guy was innocent, but he should not worry. Father and son Yang will not wield power for long. After these words, Jianshan was taken aback, remembering something. In her past life, around this time, Tianli's father was arrested. Then about 6 million disappeared from the state budget, and they will only be found in 2024 in the abandoned house of the Yang family. Seeing the smile on the guy's face, the soldier asked what he was thinking about, and Jianshan replied that he wondered what kind of face Chief Yang would make when his house was searched. The clock chimed 3 o'clock in the morning. The man's hand, with a quick reaction, turned off the alarm clock, and also the timer on his wristwatch. The male silhouette quickly took dark clothes out of the closet, and he put on a black cap. Mom muttered about who watches horror movies late at night, and that father and son are birds of a feather. Jianshan sneaked past and thought that she was having some kind of terrible dream. And when the front door opened, Mom said that there was no point in staying after school, and her son replied that he would be back soon. The modern mansion of the Yang family is located on the street. The guy looked around and thought, wow, so many cameras. Holding onto the wall, he thought, what was to be expected from a corrupt government official? Finally, the guy found a place where there seemed to be a blind spot. He pressed the watch button and the timer started. The protagonist jumped, finding support for his feet. He made a very high jump, landing on the roof. Flying further to the ground, Jianshan exhaled heavily. In a past life, the news said that money was found in some garden ornament, but there were no other specifics. He wondered where he could hide such a mountain of money. And I noticed the fountain and wondered whether it was considered a decoration. Suddenly, confusion appeared on his face. He came closer and thought, it's strange why the fountain is working in the middle of the night. It's strange why the fountain works in the middle of the night. A yawn could be heard against the night sky. It was a security guard with a flashlight who muttered that he had no need to patrol this yard, and that no one is stupid enough to rob the vice head of the district. But suddenly the man noticed something. There was an ordinary white cat standing at the edge of the fountain. He clicked his tongue and muttered that it was just a cat. The animal noticed the gurgling sound and turned in that direction. Jianshan emerged from the fountain, and the cat hissed in anger. Looking into the depths of the fountain, he thought that this was where they had hidden them, and that it was now clear why the money had not been confiscated immediately. He was lucky to find the money so quickly, but there was more of it here than he thought, and it wouldn't all fit in his backpack. Suddenly, the main character noticed a flower cart. He threw a bag of money at her, and the cart rocked slightly under the unexpected load. The protagonist chuckled, wondering whether to spend the money on a house or invest it in crypto. And even the very thought of it makes him happy. A moving car appeared behind him. A drunken elder emerged from the car and, staggering, began to drawl words about a pleasant prison sentence for Jianshan. He stated that this was the only way to treat trash like him, and added that the garbage dump was where he belonged. Hiccup. The headman was surprised and muttered that it was not rubbish at all. He peered into the cart and muttered, could this really be money, and could he really have gotten that drunk? A swinging silhouette appeared behind him. He hit the guy on the back of the head, knocking him out. Jianshan got angry and said that before calling someone trash, you should first look at yourself in the mirror. The schoolboy drives without a license and is drunk, becoming the perfect example of a spoiled rich brat. Kicking him, Jianshan declared that his mother was right, that father and son were birds of a feather. Then the hero took a knife out of his backpack. The movement was sharp and confident. He sighed heavily, as if gathering his strength before what he was about to do. The guy said with a grin that there was no point in getting his hands dirty, but you can leave a gift for such a classmate. Rustling sounds were heard and hair fell to the ground. They lay on the ground in uneven layers. Looking at the shaved head and bald spot, Jianshan briefly said that everything was ready and that he did not expect such difficulty. The main character rolled the cart, thinking that the headman would be delighted in the morning. From the old house came the sound of Jianshan waking up. In response to a knock on the door and a voice, the protagonist sleepily replied that his mother should give him 5 more minutes. She nervously replied that she was not going to warm him breakfast and that she had to go to church. When asked why, my mother explained that she had found someone's hair on a kitchen knife and that there were a lot of footprints in the hallway. The woman shouted that her son seemed to have fallen asleep again and that he had stayed up late again, as she had warned him about. The next day, a melody of someone humming could be heard in the background of the mansion. It was the security guard who muttered that the best part of the job was getting out of it, or better yet, not showing up at all. He looked down, thinking, damn, this is bad luck. The guard kicked him, deciding that he had stumbled upon a drunkard early in the morning, and ordered him to get up, because who would understand the man whose house he was sprawled out in front of? The headman muttered that what kind of scum dared to speak to him in such a tone. The man was taken aback and stuttered as he said that young Master Yang was here and why he was dressed like that. Clutching his head, he irritably said that there was no point in shouting and that it was because of him that his head was splitting. Looking at his hand, the guy asked what it was and why it was pricking like that. And then he saw a pile of his hair on the road. Gritting his teeth, the headman boiled over, asking who did this. The hero screamed that his father would kill whoever did this, whoever he was. Putting on his glasses, the headman rushed forward, throwing out that he had already sent one to prison and the next one to go there would be the guilty one. Yan Tianli ran to the mansion and said that he had been wronged again and asked his father to find and punish the culprit. Suddenly, the hero was taken aback for a second, calling out to his father again, and then a flash of indignation crossed his gaze. The boy saw his father being led away by men in uniform, and the son screamed out what was going on here. He grabbed his father by the hands and demanded that he be released immediately. A male voice called out to the boy, asking if he was Tianli. The man said it was the Anti-Corruption Bureau and that his father was suspected of seriously abusive power, and they asked the guy to help them. These words sent goosebumps down the hero's spine. Standing with his back to his son, the father said that this time he would not be able to help him. After the words that he needed to take care of himself, the headman started to cry and runny nose. The son screamed no so loudly that it could be heard even in the street. A voice rang out in the school, demanding that Jian Shan wake up. A classmate said that he heard the news and that Tianli's father had apparently been arrested. The main character calmly answered okay, but his friend was confused because he didn't understand why he wasn't surprised at all. Jian Shan opened his eye and replied that bad deeds come with a price and that he was tired. A classmate was indignant and said that he was squeezed like a lemon and that he smelled bad. The protagonist said he was fishing, but his classmate reminded him that fishing was prohibited there and that he could get arrested himself. In a past life, the entire city was rocked by a political storm. This time, Tianli's father was arrested a little earlier, and the butterfly effect began to take effect. And Jian Shan's reincarnation has already changed the flow of time. But the main character thought that now it was more important to decide how to spend 6 million. He was determined and understood that his main goal was revenge. But he had too little money to assemble his own squad. Jian Shan asked if he could invest better. He looked at the building and thought he could buy it and rent out the space. The protagonist clicked his tongue and thought that he had been poor for too long, and the best thing he could think of was to rent out space. The guy reproached himself, thinking that if he had studied normally. Around the corner, Jian Shan saw someone being beaten and thought that the security services in this area were doing a terrible job. But this is the shortest route, and you will have to wait until they finish. The man shouted at them to leave him alone and that he really didn't have any money. Covering his head with his hands, the hero begged for mercy, assuring them that he really had nothing at all. The protagonist was surprised to recognize the man being beaten as the site manager, and thought with contempt how pathetic he was. From behind, a bully was already swinging a stick at him, a snapping old fart. He hit the man on the back of the head, shouting that it was time for him to go to the coffin. The hero started coughing and had already lost his front tooth. And suddenly the chief fell to the ground, no longer moving. The hooligans came closer, looking at him and asking if he was dead. One of them swung again, offering to check. But suddenly, quick steps were heard. The silhouette of Jian Shan approached the hooligan. The protagonist made a high jump, attacking the enemy and stunning him. The guy then delivered a sharp blow to the hooligan's face. The rest of the hooligans ran up to him, asking if the boss was okay and where that bastard came from. The man came to his senses and squinted towards his savior. And then he exclaimed that it was Jian Shan. The hero calmly said that they met again, and that he couldn't sit still at the police station since he was crawling around the alleys like a rat. A moment later, all the hooligans were lying on the ground and gasping. The man looked at the guy with concern and asked what he was doing there. Jian Shan, flexing his wrist, said that he wanted to ask the same question to the site manager who found himself in this situation. Looking away, he said he was assessing public opinion and conducting an undercover investigation. Helping the man up, the protagonist said that he had been beaten to a pulp and that he was not thinking about his own safety at all. The boss said that Jian Shan should take the civil service exam and that he could hire him as a bodyguard. He continued that his car was nearby and they could talk there. A black car was driving down the road and he said that these hooligans don't know their limits. While applying ice to his face, the chief said that for some reason teenagers never think about the consequences. The main character was outraged that he was trying to prick him. But the man replied that Jian Shan was a young hero and that he owed him for today. The guy said decisively that it was time to get down to business. Security in the area was poor, and this would create new problems. The man smiled and said, "You're right. This needs to be sorted out, and then asked how Captain Lin was doing. Jian Shan replied that the boss didn't need cover, but real achievements if he wanted to advance his career. He looked at the guy in surprise and asked what he was trying to say. The protagonist told him to watch the road and added that he had a way to get rich, and Jian Shan is looking for a reliable partner. As is known, the old Eastern District is going to be demolished. The man asked in surprise if he wanted to do this very demolition. The guy got indignant and told him to watch the road, otherwise he would kill them before they could even start acting. The boss noted that this would require a lot of money and connections. The protagonist said that there is money, there will be connections, and he needs someone to solve problems and control the plan. He approached his boss Don and asked if he wanted to earn some extra money. Gritting his teeth, Don replied that he would trust him and try to do everything he asked. The guy replied with a grin that he was glad to do business with him. The man asked how he knew about the demolition and whether the Lin family had told him, and he replied that his uncle should think about it himself. The next day at school, they announced that morning self-study time had begun and everyone needed to hurry. And everyone had already sat down at their desks. Suddenly, someone's hand slammed down on the table. The guy with a towel on his head turned to Jian Shan, and his classmate was surprised. "Is he an Egyptian?" The guy with the towel continued to plead with Jian Shan, admit his guilt, and call himself a bastard who deserved to die. It was a crying elder who begged him to save his father. He knelt down and said that only he could talk to the Lin family and begged for help. The headman said that if he pulled his father out, he would bow at his feet, and the towel began to slip off his head. The guy's bald head was revealed to everyone, and the classmates began to laugh, asking what had happened to the class monitor and how brightly his head was shining. He grabbed his head and shouted at them to stop staring at him. The main character wondered why he shaved his head and whether he was really dissatisfied with his excellent work. Yang Tianli cried, thinking that he shouldn't have given that master a razor, and now everyone was laughing at him. Jian Shan turned to the headman and told him to stand up, as it was not proper for a man to kneel so easily. Stuttering, Tianli asked if the protagonist would help him. The guy said he didn't say that and reminded that his father was taken away by law, and the headman, as his son, had better think about it and assist in the investigation. Seeing Tianli's tears and snot streaming down his face, the protagonist told him to stop making a fuss, as the lesson was about to start. The classmate exhaled and began to wipe his face with his hand. Leaving quickly, he said that he had lost everything, but soon this fate would overtake the main character. A classmate said that Jian Shan saw his bald head and that he looked ugly. In the background of the house, they could hear people asking whether they should do this, since they were beaten yesterday and they hadn't recovered yet. Tianli barked at them to shut up and get ready. One of them started to light a Molotov cocktail. The hooligans were outraged and said that it would be better to refuse because a fight is one thing, but arson is quite another. Tianli turned to him rudely and told him that he was crying for nothing and that everyone would think it was an accident. Looking at the old house, the hero said that they needed to set it on fire and that they would go to hell together with the main character. The big guy raised the bottle and the guy laughed and said that he was falling into the abyss. Behind them, Jian Shan sat on a tree branch and said that the headman could not sleep and was composing poetry in the middle of the night. The classmate turned towards the sound, frightened. He asked who was there, if it was Jian Shan, and the protagonist answered them, "Yeah." Then he straightened up, looking down at the hooligans. One of them shouted out, asking what he was doing there since he should be sleeping at home. The headman ordered to seize him, and the hooligans objected that this was the same guy who beat them up yesterday. He turned around indignantly and reminded them that they had forgotten how he had treated them and that it was time for them to repay him for his kindness. Everyone started arguing, calling each other names and pushing each other. The main character sighed and said that there was no need to stand in line to see him. Jumping down from the tree, he said that they were going to die today anyway. He made a sharp swing of his hand in the air, and he punched one of the hooligans in the face, so much so that blood gushed from his nose. Jian Shan's eyes were full of rage and were getting redder with each passing second. The hooligan flew to the ground even further, rolling through the dust. The bottle broke and the flames instantly spread across the ground. The headman got angry and called him a useless brute, declaring that now it was someone else's turn. Looking at his opponent, the other bully hesitantly asked if it was really his turn to fight him. Having handed over the bottles, he turned around and, as he ran away, said that he remembered that the gas had not been turned off at home and wished the young gentleman to take care of himself. Yan Tianli shouted after him, furious to the limit, calling him an ungrateful creature. Roughly, almost growling, the main character asked where the headman was even looking, as if challenging him straight to his face and not intending to endure another second. The guy was clearly scared. It was evident in his every movement. He started swinging bottles and told them not to come closer, because Tianli wouldn't be afraid to throw it at him. The main character suddenly ran forward. He grabbed the headman by the hand, and he thought that the hero was so fast and strong. Tianli understood that he would never be able to cope with him alone. Then the class president nervously told them to stop and that he was just joking since they were classmates. Jianshan laughed and said that since they were classmates, then Tianli would do him a favor. Let him just shut up. The headman responded to these words, in the sense. Unable to bear it any longer, the protagonist hit the boy, forcing the headman to shut up, otherwise he would wake up his mother. There was a whimper, and Tianli said he was calling the police. Jianshan said that he could call, and added that his whining also violated the silence, if you think about it. The chief said that they had received a report of criminals and ordered the arrest of the bald guy. The swollen headman shouted that they were blind, because it was Jianshan who had used violence and even broken his leg. Tianli was indignant and said that Don Li was an ungrateful bastard and that this was after everything his father had done for him. The man smiled, and Jan seemed to be confused about how things worked in official circles, where it was important to be able to read the situation. He continued that if you play with fire without understanding the consequences, you can get burned, and ordered him to be taken away. The boss thanked Jianshan for his good work. Maybe he should organize a small project to help him relax. The protagonist calmly but firmly replied that that was enough for today, and that new things awaited them tomorrow. The next day, a tall, multi-layered building of gray concrete stretched out before them. The boss, stepping in a puddle, angrily declared that the road was full of potholes, and that it was unlikely that much money would be squeezed out of such a place. Jianshan reflected that in his past life, the redevelopment of this area had produced 17 multimillionaires. The protagonist replied that he would give a hint and explained that this area was included in the city's expansion plan. Due to the construction of a new high-tech industrial zone, land prices here will skyrocket, as will demolition compensation. The man laughed and said that even such things were known to the guy and that he had bet on that horse. Jianshan thought that they were simply using each other and that cooperation would help him grab a piece of the money pie. The protagonist said that it was time for them to go because they still had a lot to see. A sign for a bar that they were urgently trying to sell appeared in front of them. Handing the man the documents, Jianshan said that he just needed to sign, and 150,000 would be his. The bar owner suddenly heard someone say that the bar was good. While inspecting the premises, the manager asked why the owner had decided to sell the premises. He briefly said that his son was in debt. Debt collectors were putting pressure on him, and otherwise he would have to give up the entire building. Don Li flushed and exclaimed that he was simply a terrible son. Jianshan pursed his lips and thought that debt collectors wouldn't lay claim to a bar that was about to be torn down. The guy asked who his son borrowed money from. The father sighed and said that his son had borrowed from Chen Jihu and that he needed the bar more than the money. The man admitted that he was afraid of something unclean, so he decided to urgently sell the bar. Jianshan smiled and said that Chief Dong should keep the contract. The boss was surprised and said, "Won't they even have a glass of wine while they're here?" The protagonist said that now is not the time to relax, because someone just like them is waiting for the west wind. A man was lighting a cigarette when a female voice addressed him, asking him to look at her. The girl in the shirt said that instead of dirty streets, there is a better sight. He replied that she did not understand anything and that the king must watch over his territories. Coming closer, the girl asked if he considered her a queen, since he called himself a king. Chen Jinhu, the Night King who had ruled over Jiangcheng's affairs for 2 decades, only laughed. Casinos and creditors formed his network, which spread throughout the city, and therefore some called him Chen half the city. They also say that after midnight, the whole of Jiangcheng is supposedly in his hands. The car was parked in the rain, and from inside it came the sound of Chen Jinhu being a real mad dog. The chief continued, if he intended to engage in restructuring. There are also rumors that the Chen family from the capital is behind him. These words immediately attracted the attention of the protagonist. He remembered his traitorous colleague, the way he was killed in his past life, and of course, the culprit of this whole thing, Chen. Laughing, the protagonist realized that he had finally caught up with these bastards. The boss asked to clarify whether he was also on friendly terms with the Chen family. Jianshan said that he knew a few things about them, but the boss was right about one thing. Chen Jinhu was a mad dog. He clenched his fist firmly and said that if this dog put his paws where they shouldn't, he would tear them off. The guy told old Don to continue running the bar and leave everything else to him. The protagonist, looking at his reflection, decided that it was time to collect the debts accumulated from his past life from the Chen family. A shout was heard from the balcony, what he said. The man with the cigarette asked again that the bar had been stolen right from under their noses. The boy responded in fear that the informants had said that the old man had simply sold him out. Having hit him, the man continued that they dared to do such a thing. He was indignant that they had arranged everything, even dragged him into it, and someone had simply gone and taken everything for themselves. A man was heading towards the golden door, and the workers said that the manager had finally arrived, and Mr. Hu was furious. The manager ran into the room and said that Mr. Hu needed to calm down because they were already dealing with it. He handed the phone to the man and told him to look at the photo. In the photo, one of them appears to be a schoolboy, and the other is Don Lee. Hu was surprised and said that Dong Dapao had always kissed the Yang family's ass, and why didn't he drown with them? And what kind of a schoolboy was this? Because he didn't look at all like a person from their profession. The gentleman ordered that the boy's identity be established and that the dossier be brought in 3 days. Pointing to a subordinate, he ordered him to take some men and watch the bar for the next few days so that he could intervene if anything went wrong. Otherwise, the man threatened to simply castrate him and send him to a brothel. It was night outside. The guys were approaching the bar. A classmate stopped his friend, holding him by the hand. He became nervous and said that ahead was the territory of Chen Jinghu, whom he had heard about as a very scary person. Jianshan replied that there was nothing to be afraid of. Just follow the plan and stay put. The main character told his friend that he could play on his phone to make time pass faster. Jianshan will take the risk if he appears at all, and nothing will happen to his friend. The hero was worried, thinking that they were still too young for this kind of place. Then the guy replied that since he didn't need a new console, they could go back. Then the friend, stammering, told him to be careful. The main character told him to hide for now and wait for the signal. Looking at the sign, Jianshan thought that this was the underground emperor and decided that he would visit him today. He grinned and said he hoped he wouldn't be disappointed with the place. The guy thought that he was lucky, because in his past life he took part in the assault on this place, and knowing where the secret door is, the hero knocked on it without hesitation. A man appeared at the barred window and said that they were closed today and he needed to leave. Jianshan thought that he had seen the case materials, and the phrase "we are closed today" must be something like a password. He replied that whether they are closed or not depends on luck, and I thought that this seemed to be the correct answer. The man opened the door and said that he was glad to welcome him, but he didn't know him. Perhaps the guy was here for the first time. Jianshan threw him a lot of bills, asking if he knew it. The guy asked how they usually have fun here and demanded to be shown everything. The man answered yes, yes, and clapped his hands. In front of him stood prostitutes in rabbit costumes, and they called him a handsome young man. The worker told the guest to get lost and asked who was to blame for his failure. The woman said that nothing could be done if luck had turned its back, but the young gentleman had success on his face and today he would hit the jackpot. He just chuckled and said that luck had nothing to do with these matters. The hero approached the table and said that he wanted to buy chips for 100,000. They handed Jianshan the chips and said that everything was ready and that they wished the gentleman good luck. Luck, many said, plays a key role in gambling, but it was really all about psychology. And in minor tricks, the main character thought, the dealer announced that he would now deal the cards. Looking at the cards, the guy thought he had an ace of hearts, a king of spades, and a queen of diamonds. Not a flush, but still a good hand. The other player chuckled something, and the hero immediately noticed it. His ears twitched, his facial muscles moved up. It looked like the fat man was lucky too. Looking at the other player, he thought that the long-haired one was of no use. But he clearly wears the very long nail on his little finger for no particular reason, for example, to mark cards. The dealer said that everyone had looked at the cards and whether anyone wanted to raise. The players said they were making a call and adding another 5,000. And the main character held out all his chips and declared that he was going all in. The fat man clenched his teeth and thought that he had put everything in and that his cards must be very good. The other player thought it might be a bluff. The guy raised his hand and asked that he was playing the game for the first time and that the better his hand, the more he should bet. The dealer awkwardly replied that one could say that, and Jianshan declared that it meant he had done everything correctly. Everyone passed, and the dealer announced that the pot went to the young man. When he showed his cards, everyone was indignant and said that this was a good hand. The heroes were outraged and decided that he had deceived them, declaring that they wanted to get even and asking where the little rat had gone. Jin Shan was already walking with his chips to another table because he can't use the same trick twice. A woman in a suit ran up to him and said that he had won so much and that she had also said that luck was on his side. The main character said that his aunt should forget about it because he was still in school. The heroine was indignant, and the guy asked if there were any faster games here. She smirked and said that if he was looking for a thrill, he would enjoy this game. At the table, the players shouted small, big, big. They hurried the croupier while he jingled the dice in his hands. Jianshan closed his eyes and thought that the frequency of the collision suggested 4, 5, or 6, and that the sound was a little muffled. He heard a sharp blow, opened his eyes and realized that the last edge had landed on the 6. The dealer stopped and said that this was the last chance to raise the stakes, after which he announced that that was all. The guy handed over all his chips, saying he was betting everything on the big one. The man thought that the guy was going all in again and that this guy had already won several games. And the cubes showed a large one, and they called it incredible, noting that the young man's luck was amazing. The croupier was taken aback and wondered how this was possible, since he wasn't wearing X-ray glasses. Jianshan picked up his chip and said he wanted to continue, that he was tired and wanted to win so he could go home and get some sleep. Smiling awkwardly, he didn't understand what it meant to let him win. And if everything continues like this, then how will he explain himself to the boss? The main character was watched through cameras and people were puzzled as to who this guy was. Hu was indignant and thought that the guy did not understand when to stop. He demanded that the manager bring this Japanese woman here immediately. There were a lot of chips on the table. Everyone around was surprised and whispered that he had already won several million. And the croupier is crying, and knowing the owner here, this boy will most likely be sold to a brothel. The large door opened suddenly. 2 bodyguards appeared on the threshold, and behind them stood a female silhouette. A woman's leg in an elegant heel and shiny stockings stepped forward. The girl in a suit and short skirt walked confidently on. She turned to the croupier and informed him that the man could go. The heroine glanced to the side with her blue eyes, and he fell on Jianshan, who was sitting at a distance. The protagonist became wary when he noticed a woman who seemed familiar to him. The manager announced that from now on their lucky man would be served by Ms. Noyama Shizuru. The guy was taken aback when he realized that this was the one he thought was in the Golden Triangle. The girl reached out for the glass and did so calmly and confidently. She turned to the gentleman and calmly said that she asked him to prepare his chips. In the past, a girl and a boy were sitting at a table in noisy Shibuya and discussing how it was indeed too loud. The heroine poured a drink and said that Shibuya at night is noisy, dangerous, and chaotic, and that this is its usual atmosphere. With a smile, she noted that such a special atmosphere could not be found anywhere else and that he probably agreed. The guy replied that this was true, and then the girl asked not to close them. Not understanding what she was talking about, the protagonist asked again what, and she answered so that the guy would not close his eyes. She put her foot on the table and continued to say that Mr. Zhang's feet were like those of a wolf. Stroking the guy's face, she continued to say that she liked the way his gaze pierced her and asked him not to look away. The protagonist noted that she is a dangerous cat, Ms. Shizuru. The girl noted that she was not going to pry into his soul, but simply wanted to spend the night with him. That night she was drunk and talking a lot and said that in order to really hear the bones, you need to feel their breath and sense the subtle body language of your opponent. It's like listening to someone's heartbeat. Looking at her now, he remembered her body language and breathing. The heroine began to shake the glass sharply and quickly, and Jianshan closed his eyes, listening. He opened his eyes sharply, catching something, and indeed, the hands are relaxed. The sternocleidomastoid muscle is tense, and also the direction of the folds on the clothes. Here, the croupier stopped and turned to the gentleman. He just smiled and said he was going all in, naming a special 3 threes. Looking at the way the main character was handing over the chips, the girl thought he was crazy. She was taken aback, thinking that he had put everything on a special 3 because that was impossible. The boy firmly demanded that Ms. Noyama raise her glass. She clenched her teeth, taking her time doing so as if trying to gain one more moment before the inevitable. And suddenly, lifting the glass, she saw 3 threes inside. The observers were convinced that this combination was indeed there and froze. The manager became nervous, realizing that they had to pay him more than 50 million. The protagonist thought that they met again in such a noisy place, and he mentally thanked Shiruza. Mr. Hu flushed, thinking, this is who he really is. A subordinate ran up to him and said that he had taken a good look at him and realized who this guy was. He reported that this was the same schoolboy who bought the bar. The man yelled that first he buys his bar and then steals his money and that it's unfair. Taking men and weapons, Hu declared that he would dig up 18 generations of his ancestors from the ground and feed them to the dogs. Looking at the mountain of chips, he was asked if he wanted to exchange it all for cash. Jianshan replied that yes, and as quickly as possible. A group of people appeared behind him, angrily throwing out the thought that the little bastard had decided to turn their establishment upside down and run away. Swinging his sword, the man noted that he would not leave here alive. Suddenly, everyone became indignant, asking who turned off the light and why it appeared so quickly. Then a subordinate ran in and asked where Lord Tiger was. They saw a man lying on the floor and cried out that he needed help. The protagonist clicked his tongue and said that he had a hard skin, then called Dungji and said that it was time for them to get out of here. A woman appeared behind him and coldly asked what he was looking for. Boy, she was with a group of guys. Grinning, she said that she wanted to guess whether he was looking for death. Jianshan said that Auntie could move over because he needed to go home. Pointing at him, Lee declared that they needed to grab him and that no one would leave their casino with any money. The group chuckled and demanded that he hand over the money, hinting that otherwise his face would suffer. The protagonist exhaled and muttered that he had planned everything, but he certainly didn't expect the crazy woman to appear. She was indignant, saying that the crazy one here was the one who dared to cross Lord Tiger's path. Throwing the suitcases on the ground, Jianshan grinned as if to say, "The rabbit is sold to the tiger." Stretching his arms, the guy said briefly, as if he had already resigned himself to it, "Oh well." Taking a stance, he calmly continued that he would deal with them in a matter of seconds. The protagonist calmly demanded that they not waste time and attack all at once. One of the guys got indignant and said that he seemed to be a fearless fool. He rushed forward and said that he was going to give him a good beating. They rushed to jump and he shouted at him to say goodbye to life, calling him small. But Jianshan suddenly grabbed his opponent's hand, and with a cold look he clenched his hand into a fist, hitting the enemy so hard that he flew back. The group shouted, turning to their boss. Turning to the group, the protagonist asked what was wrong with the others. And do they really still want to attack one by one? The men were clearly frightened and nervous. They suddenly ran at him, shouting that he couldn't handle two of them. The protagonist grinned and said that it was better this way. He jumped very high above them, and he said that he would squash bugs like them in one go. A moment later, 3 motionless men were lying in front of him. The woman was indignant and said that they were making fun of her because some schoolboy had laid them down for no reason. Jianshan approached and calmly said that Madam would be next. She started to run away, and the hero thought how it was possible to run so fast in heels. Dengzhi called out to him and asked Jianshan if he had finished. And when asked where he had been, the friend replied that he had found their spare generator and turned off the lights on the entire street. He happily declared that they were doing so well together that he could drop out of school and become a criminal. But the main character went on, and the guys shouted asking him to wait. The woman ran forward, wondering why the lights had gone out all over the street. She saw some familiar men and said that thank God they were here. The heroine immediately started babbling to the manager that they needed reinforcements because this brat. But he only waved his hand, and he slapped the thief in the face, saying that there was no need to play the fool because she had allowed the boy to escape. The cameras showed that she was practically kissing him the entire evening, and it was obvious that they were working together. Holding the cut on her cheek and crying, the woman said she didn't understand how this could have happened, as she was only loyal to Master Hu. But the man said he didn't care. He needed someone he could blame for what happened on. He told them to get everything they needed out of her and to be creative, because the man didn't believe that the thief didn't know anything. From inside the building, a woman could be heard begging the manager to stop and saying that she really wasn't to blame for anything. Morning came, and the school heard the call to turn to page 17, assignment 1. The friend was sleeping at the next desk, and the main character was covered by a stack of books. He thought that now Chungjin-hu would have no time for restructuring. Old man Dong was doing well, but he couldn't relax. Once the news gets out, there will be those who want their share, and he must use his advantage. The next step was to set up a private security company. As far as the boy remembered, some professionals had deep hatred for the Chen family. The teacher called out to him sharply and demanded that Jianshan answer whether the lines intersect. The man called him a talentless idiot and said that he was always daydreaming and would never pass his exams. The protagonist said guiltily that he had indeed listened. The teacher said that the assessment was coming soon and he would not allow him to ruin his average grade, so now there would be extra classes. Jianshan was indignant. Why should he be the one to answer after all? Dengzhi was sleeping, wasn't that worse, and was even talking in his sleep. A classmate muttered some geometric law. The main character was taken aback when he learned that his classmate was ranked 4th in the class. The bell rang and everyone left the classroom. The corridor was illuminated by soft evening light. A female voice asked why Jianshan was late. The main character sighed and said that since when did they even start celebrating in extra classes? He was told that discipline is never a bad thing. The guy's face suddenly softened. He recognized the voice and asked what the heroine was doing here. The girl asked if her presence surprised him. The guy laughed and said that it was a funny coincidence that she also came to the extra classes. But the answer surprised him, because she said that she was there in the first place, fulfilling her duties as a teacher. The girl noted that she took first place in the class. Standing up, she said that only when she found out that the guy needed extra lessons did she pluck up the courage. And she added that she asked the teacher to help the main character. The girl sheepishly stated that Jian Shan would have to try hard. Lin Shi grabbed his tie with her hand, and she admitted that she came here only for him. Then the heroine suddenly pulled Jian Shan closer by his tie, and she whispered that he should obey his teacher well. The protagonist felt embarrassed, feeling the heat rising to his ears because they were standing too close. Lin Si noted that his ears and face were red and said that this proved that he did not have facial paralysis. The guy noted that they were there for classes and asked what she was doing then. The girl briefly asked whether it was possible to calculate the weight of his body A, friction B, resistance C, and with what force she was pulling. Jian Shan replied that he was a fool and that it was too early for him to study physics and that he needed to start with mathematics. She abruptly let go of his tie and said that she would then check whether he understood the functions. She started writing on the board with chalk. Then the girl quietly turned to look at the hero, and suddenly she blushed slightly. Pointing to the board, Ling Si said that Jian Shan should try to find the domain of this function. He asked what the domain of definition was. The girl asked in surprise if he had studied at all. The girl ran to him and said that she couldn't believe it and that she would try to explain everything to him. Jian Shan replied that it was fine, but asked not to come so close. Touching his hair, she said that she would not pull his tie, that his bangs needed to be removed, and offered to pin them up with her hair clip. Removing her hand, he shouted out no thank you and suggested they just continue their lesson. The main character clenched his teeth and couldn't understand how this could happen, because he had seen a lot in his past life. But why is he so worried about some girl? The clock struck 7:30 in the evening. While packing his things, Jian Shan exhaled and thought that it was finally all over. The girl reminded him that he shouldn't forget to repeat everything they had gone through today, otherwise she would have to treat him specially. When the heroes were walking home, Lin Shi called out to the guy. She awkwardly asked if the main character really hated her. Jian Shan said in surprise, "No, why would he?" The girl blushed and said that she simply didn't, and nothing more, but he told her. And she continued that she liked him. Surprised, Jian Shan asked what she meant. Lin Shi said that she could do it again and that she liked him. And she quietly added that from the very day he saved her. That's why the girl tried so hard to attract his attention. And now it seemed to her that it all looked childish. She asked what about Jian Shan. The heroine excitedly asked if he had feelings for her. The main character was simply taken aback when he heard all this. Then he closed his eyes and reluctantly apologized to her, explaining that they were going their separate ways and that he didn't want to drag her down. Lin Si ran after him and said that if it was about his grades, she could help and asked him not to leave. The light was on in the mansion, softly spilling through the high windows. A man's hand slowly swirled a glass of wine, and someone said that Uncle Hu had disappointed him greatly. Hu knelt down and begged young Master Chen to forgive him. But this guy seemed too strange, and he didn't understand how his limbs could be broken. Chen replied that he didn't care about the process and that only the result mattered to him. These places were key points for future storage, and my father valued them highly. The man banged his head on the floor and said that he knew he would find a way to get everything back, and begged Mr. Chen to give him another chance. Coming closer, the guy said that he could give him this chance, but that he should remember one thing. Chen abruptly dropped the glass from his hands, and it crashed to the floor in front of Hu. Grabbing him by the neck, Chen barked that if he made another mistake, his head would replace the glass, and ordered him to get out. Jumping up quickly, he shouted, gasping with relief, "Yes, thank you." Then the hero silently approached the empty glass. As he poured the wine, he thought of Jian Shang, the bastard whose name he had never heard before. He also dared to cross the Chen family's path, which he found curious. He decided that he would have to experience the Chen family's methods on himself. The subordinate led Lord Hu and asked him to walk more slowly. The man shouted at them to be careful, reminding them that no one knew what condition his leg was in, and called out to the second man, "And these shoes are from a limited edition collection, and if they get damaged, he won't let it go unpunished." There was a bug attached to the sole of this shoe. The protagonist heard the man scold his subordinates for their failure and demand that they look into Chen's case. They argued about which Chen they had in mind, and one made fun of the other for not knowing before joining the gang. In their family, there was only one young master, their only heir, Chen Yu. Jian Shan clenched his teeth in anger. Taking off his headphones and jumping up from his chair, he shouted that he had finally found him. He ran towards the exit, repeating that he would take revenge and that he would finish him off right now. But the guy stopped, grabbed the handle, and quietly said that he couldn't. If he acts impulsively, he risks losing, and a simple reprisal will not bring him enough suffering. Taking a deep breath, Jian Shan thought that he needed to calm down first. Revenge requires strength and calmness. That was the conclusion he came to. Returning back, the protagonist thought that he now had startup capital. And first, he needs to assemble a team that is completely devoted to him. After all, this is the only way he can defeat the Chen family and completely destroy them. The next day, events moved to the shooting range. Looking at Jian Shan, the male voice noted that the guy was a good shot and his stance was even better than his interlocutors. The soldier was outraged that he was being compared to a schoolboy and that the officer was going too far. The man briefly stated that each of his shots hit the same spot and asked if the soldier could do the same. The officer briefly praised the guy and jokingly asked if he was really a special forces soldier. The soldier merely muttered that he would compare such shooting to an amusement park ride, nothing special. The protagonist just turned to look at him coldly, and he calmly said that it was too easy for him and suggested making it more difficult. Jian Shan chuckled and shouted at the soldier to throw him the cartridge case. As he swung, he just thought to himself like, he wants to shoot off the cartridge case in flight, the impudent upstart. And he threw the cartridge case with all his might, challenging him, "Well, just try it." The protagonist's gaze became focused. He raised the pistol and pointed it forward. He pulled the trigger and a shot rang out. The bullet and the cartridge case touched exactly in the air. The officer watched what was happening with a satisfied smile, while the soldier stood in complete shock. The soldier exhaled, trying to save face, and muttered that it was just an accident. The man couldn't stand it and barked at him not to be stubborn, and Jian Shan calmly stated that if that didn't convince him, then he could do it again. And this time he would do everything with his eyes closed. Pushing the boy away, the officer asked Jian Shan if it was true that he had never practiced before. The hero thought he might have overdone it and replied that he was just shooting at balloons at the amusement park. The man chuckled and said that it meant balls, and that it would probably be worth taking soldiers there from time to time. And suddenly the guy said that he actually came here to ask for help. The officer replied that he should let him post it, and if it was within the law, he would do everything in his power. He said he wanted to open a security company and hire veterans. He wanted professionals to be able to use their skills and be fairly paid for it. They have been through a lot, and the world should not forget them. Moreover, with such a detachment, they could better monitor public order and deal with corruption. The man sighed with a smile and said that he was still young, but his ideals deserved respect. Then he showed his thumb and said that he should tell him what he needed and he would do it. The protagonist smiled and said that he needed reliable candidates, and he may also need them to put in a good word about the necessary clearances and qualifications. The officer briefly wrote down the address of the Veterans Contact Center and said that he would sort out the paperwork. He handed over a piece of paper and said that all the guys there were what they needed. First-class fighters. They bumped fists, and the officer said that he would succeed and that the world would still know his name. And if the main character encounters trouble, he should not hesitate to ask him for help. The guy's gaze became cold and determined. There was no longer any doubt or hesitation in it. And now Chen Yu's nightmare was just beginning. The protagonist, lying down, read the address and name of Pei Peng and thought that he needed to go to him first. The next day, he walked among many old buildings. Looking over the address, the hero thought that the layout of the slums was even more confusing than he expected. Turning the corner, Jian Shan saw a man and said that he needed Pei Peng. He didn't even turn around and said that he wasn't working today and to come back tomorrow. Then the protagonist stated that he was not here to fix anything and that officer He had sent him. The man finally turned to face him, squinting. Showing the piece of paper, the protagonist said that the officer had given him this address and that he would like to talk. Wiping sweat from his face, the man replied that he was there to fix things, not to chat, and that he was not interested in anything unrelated to work. The guy chuckled and said that he just wanted to discuss a job that could change a man's situation. After all, the man clearly didn't want to remain an unrecognized talent, an uncut diamond, or simply penniless. The hero got angry and asked the boy where he got so much courage to decide to irritate an adult. Jian Shan replied that there was no catch. He gives money and in return receives loyalty, and asked the man's opinion. To this, he replied that the boy's lips were still wet for such words. He doesn't know what connection the guy has with He Changshan, but since he sent him, he should have explained that money can't buy him. The protagonist replied that, of course, he knew that a ferocious monster needed to be tamed with a whip. The hero gloomily stated that he did not have a whip, and he bent down to pick up the chopsticks that were lying on the ground, and he threw it to him, adding that he could take advantage of it. Jian Shan resolutely caught the stick. The man explained that the first one to drop the stick on the ground would lose. For a while, the main character just looked at her. After that, he stood up and wished me luck, and the heroes simultaneously rushed towards each other. The guy's gaze was piercing, sharp, as if he saw right through the hero. Jianshan's foot suddenly stopped, as if he had sunk into the ground. And then he jumped high into the air, flying right over the man. And he struck the man's wand with his wand, and the wood clicked loudly in the air. The man's stick bent, but still held. Pei Peng smiled because he was in complete control of the situation. But suddenly he turned pale, as if something had gone wrong. The main character swung his leg, fast, sharp, almost predatory. And the man managed to jump back at the last second. Jianshan exhaled and chuckled. This was not a bad defense. The man asked if he wanted to check. He rushed towards the guy, the air in front of him trembling with pressure. The man made a sharp swing with his fist, and the hero ducked, and the blow passed over his head. This continued several more times. And then the main character raised his leg, and he dealt an unexpected blow to the opponent's hand, so that he lost his wand. She flew far away, and Pei Peng did not understand how this boy did such a thing. Suddenly the boy appeared and said that he was home and that the teacher had praised him today. The man shouted at Xiaofei, his voice harsh. He was told to run, but he froze, as if his legs had stopped obeying him. The main character ran towards him with all his might. Jianshan barely managed to stop the onslaught, and the man shouted if Xiaofei was okay. The boy answered yes and said that this older brother is so cool and fast as lightning. Xiaofei then asked his brother who would win if they fought. The man just looked at the guest silently. They entered the workshop and Pei Peng asked what he wanted to talk about. He then pointed to the table and said that these were all Xiaofei's medicines, and added that indeed he needed to change his position. The man was referring to Xiaofei's situation and added that just because he was talking to a guest did not mean he had admitted defeat. Pei Peng said that his brother distracted him and he would have caught the stick himself, but he went with the guest because he saved Xiaofei. He said that he knew the code and that his life was now in the hands of the guest, so he asked him to tell him what he wanted from him. Jianshan exhaled and said that he was not going to ask him to kill or set fires, but wanted to open a company. He said he needed a proven team and a person who could lead it. This meant that Pei Peng had to come out of the shadows. The hero said he had to admit, turning to Pei Peng. Then, looking at the framed demobilization photo, he said that it turned out quite well, and Pei Peng's eyes are full of hope and determination. While drinking water, he said that ideals quickly disappear when faced with reality and the indifference of others. He said that they should forget the conversation, invited the boss to sit down, and noted that he had already poured him some tea. The boy replied that there was no need for formalities, asked to be called Jianshan, and remarked that Pei Peng seemed to have been through a lot, and the people for whom he risked his life sometimes turn out to be bastards who do not know such concepts as honor and gratitude. And then he asked if Pei Peng understood what he was talking about, addressing him as his brother. The guy said that those who work for others should not become a laughingstock for nobodies. He said he wanted to create a team of veterans and work together on security, and if they encounter lawlessness, they will become a shield and a sword for people, because this requires strong bonds and first-class skills. Jianshan said he needed a leader like Pei Peng, who was seasoned in war and could unite the team. The man exhaled and spoke quietly, addressing him first as boss and then as Jianshan. And he resolutely clenched his fist, saying that he could be relied upon, and that from now on he would carry out any of his orders. The man asked the boy to give him a fist bump. He replied that first he needed to sort out his family problems. And bumping his fists, Jianshan promised that they would find a way to help Xiaofei. He told him to wait for news from him. Birds were flying against the backdrop of the evening sky, and a child's cry was heard that the cartoon was about to begin. Children were running around the yard, and one was calling his sister, asking her to wait. He noted that his little sister was so fast. The main character suddenly became alarmed by something. Around the corner, he noticed a dark silhouette, who suddenly stepped back, hiding in the shadows. Jianshan let out a sigh, noting that this was the most obvious surveillance he had ever seen. The protagonist came closer and said that they did not stop plotting, and demanded that he come out. Then the girl said that he had gone too far when he heard the word intrigue. She came up and said that the word followed sounded too inadequate, and that, in fact, she is his tutor and should make sure that he doesn't miss classes. She blushed and quietly added that she was very worried about him. The protagonist said that she had forgotten his words, because they were going down different paths and he would have to face risks. The girl asked how dangerous it was and clarified whether it was comparable to a thug with a knife. Suddenly she noticed a car quickly approaching behind Jianshan and shouted. They didn't understand why she wasn't slowing down. Then the guy shouted for Lin Shi to move aside, but she only ran forward. The girl quickly pushed the main character away from the road. Jianshan began to lose his balance and staggered, trying to stay on his feet. Because of this, the heroine couldn't stay on her feet either. The two of them collapsed to the ground, and the boy shouted if Lin Shi was okay. She smiled and noted that everything was fine with her and added that she was not afraid to take risks. An armed group got out of the car and one of them said that the guy was fearless and had crossed Lord Hu, so that was the end for him. Jian Shan jumped into a stance and told Ling Xi not to stand up or look in their direction. Without wasting a second, he rushed towards his opponents. He struck one first, putting pent-up rage and cold determination into each blow. And then the second one, and he flew up, not even having time to raise his weapon. Watching the fight, the heroine shouted to Jian Shan that there was an enemy behind him. A man with swords was flying towards him at great speed. The whistle of a bullet suddenly pierced the air. She quickly crashed into the blade of the sword. The bald man didn't understand what had happened and decided to look at the sword. He noticed that it was a bullet and did not understand where it came from. Someone shouted from the rooftop that they should just try swinging their sword in front of Madame Chen again. A group of guys said they would give them a choice. Either they get out of here immediately, or they die. The main character sat in a dark hospital corridor, immersed in silence and his own thoughts. He recalled how the girl's body went limp and weak. Jian Shan clenched his fist and quietly said that if Chen Yu touched her, he would regret it. And he muttered that he would make him pay 100 times more. A nurse appeared at the door and loudly asked where the patient's relatives were. She said the patient had superficial injuries and was in shock, and that paperwork needed to be completed if he was a relative. Jian Shan quietly replied that he was just her classmate. Two men appeared in the distance, and one of them said that he was a relative. The main character immediately shouted out that he was asking Uncle Lin for forgiveness. But the man did not want to listen to him and raised his hand, showing that the conversation was over for him. Jian Shan looked worried, trying to understand what was going on and why they didn't want to listen to him. In the ward, Ling Xi hurriedly explained that she had fallen on her own and that Jian Shan had nothing to do with it, adding that he had protected her very well. The man held his daughter's hands and said that she was already an adult, but he still continued to worry about her. The girl asked her father if he knew the people who had dispersed the bandits, and if they were his men from the unit. He said that these were their people, and some things were more complicated than she thought. But he would sort everything out so that his daughter would not worry. Standing at the door, the protagonist thought that they said that the Lin family was very influential in the capital, and it seemed to be true. Then he heard an approaching voice telling her to rest and that he would come by tomorrow. As soon as the man left, the guy briefly said that he couldn't protect Lin Shi and asked for forgiveness. Closing his eyes, father said that Jian Shan's apology meant nothing to him. The protagonist shouted that it was because of him that Lin Shi was in danger and suffered. The man stopped him and said that if Jian Shan really wanted to apologize, he should break the legs of those who attacked his daughter. He briefly replied that he understood and would not leave the attackers unpunished. As he left, my father added that words must be backed up by actions. Ling Xi is resting. Jian Shan should also go home so as not to disturb his parents. Chen Xiao reported that the guy had been given a hint, but Ling Xi was still slightly hurt. The voices continued, and someone remarked that the injuries were minor and that they would wait to see how Ling Zhenbang would react. Jian Shan is just a little grasshopper and he doesn't have much time left to jump. The protagonist chuckled and said that Chen's dogs had developed great ambitions. The demolition project was just a cover and Chen needs the old districts to control all the business. The guy jumped at these words, hearing about the product and the business network, and realized that this was not a simple demolition of buildings. The guy realized and thought that he had found Chen Yu's weak spot. The voices continued, and someone said that when the goods arrived, they would sort it out together. But Jian Shan had already taken off his headphones. The guy decided that he needed to gather enough strength before the goods arrived. The next day, a voice came from the gray building that the first group had assembled according to Colonel He's list. The main character entered the room, and Pan announced that he was their boss. The guy introduced himself and said that there was no boss here, only comrades, and that they were in Lundun and Bao. The man stared at him strangely. The man asked how old he was, adding that they had not been called there because the school was short of security guards. Others started asking if they were security or not, what they were supposed to do, catch those who were stealing food or patrol. Jian Shan asked them to calm down and said that before work they needed to undergo training, and these exercises were part of it. The man said it was about overcoming obstacles, recalled that he was the first in the army, and asked if he doubted their abilities. The protagonist took the gun and said that they just needed to restore their skills. They need to be able to respond to organized attacks and ensure the complete safety of their clients within the law. As he reloaded his pistol, he said he would now show him how the training was going and asked Pan to time it. He was told to get ready and start in a moment. The countdown started and the guy rushed forward. He jumped abruptly onto the device. Then, without slowing down, the main character ran along the round discs and instantly jumped over the low obstacle. Everyone watched him, realizing that this guy was clearly not simple. Then the hero raised his hand, took aim, and fired. He hit the target with green paint, and the countdown stopped at 58 seconds. The man was surprised, because in front of him stood a schoolboy, and although the area was smaller than the standard one, there were no fewer exercises here. Turning around, he said that he was just a schoolboy and added that they should run faster than the schoolboy. Otherwise, they cannot be trusted to protect clients if they themselves risk getting injured. It is unprofessional. Everyone said that the guy was wrong to call himself a boss, and decided to show him who the real military ace was. A concrete multi-story building stood against the daytime sky. Someone pressed the doorbell, and a short sound echoed throughout the house. The woman opened the door and calmly said hello, after which she asked what happened. The guy and the man said they were from a new security company and wanted to check out the situation in the area. For example, are there extortionists? Are electric bikes being stolen? Has anyone lost things? Or perhaps people could have gone missing. The woman stuttered and asked again if anyone had gone missing. She shouted that everything was fine with them, they didn't know anything, and quickly slammed the door. The heroes exchanged glances, noticing something alarming in her abrupt behavior. Further surveys also went slowly. People either refused to answer, or they spoke evasively and immediately changed their expression as soon as they heard the word missing. And the friendly atmosphere instantly became tense. The heroes only made a short remark that people were clearly afraid of something. When asked what they were investigating, Jian Shan calmly replied that they were digging under the Chen family. The man was taken aback and blurted out that these were local criminals, and wasn't he afraid? The guy continued that yesterday he spoke with Chief Dong from the department. In recent months, 7 or 8 people have been reported missing in the old city, and the trail always goes cold. He suggested that these disappearances might be connected to the shady dealings of the Chen family. Pan noticed that the boss was climbing into a hornet's nest. Voices were heard, and someone shouted to Brother Scar that they had spotted the two of them. A group of people said they had been hanging around here all day asking about missing people. The main character simply said that it was time to stretch his legs. The hooligans said that they dared to disturb his land, and before wagging their tongues, they should have found out who was the boss here. Covering the guy, Peng shouted for them to watch their language and asked what they wanted. Jin Shan replied that they were just chatting with the locals and that it was not allowed. He chuckled and noticed that they were hanging around here like ladies of easy virtue, thinking that they were in charge here. Scar was indignant and said that petty ignoramuses should be held accountable for their words. He shouted to the brothers to go forward and show these people the power of the 4 dragons of the old street. The fat man rushed forward to knock them down. He stuck his head out and shouted that he was a living bowling alley. But the fat man was quickly grabbed by the head. Pan chuckled and asked what the bullshit name of his technique was. And slamming his face into the ground, the man screamed, calling him a blockhead. Scar declared that it was a disaster. This guy was capable of something and ordered the two of them to deal with him together. And he said that he would deal with the main character himself. The bully was surprised why he kept the weakling for himself, and the hero barked at him to shut up and remind him who was in charge here. The guy laughed and said that since he was so weak, he should come up and beat him. And if he doesn't cope, then how will he even show up in the area? Scar said with a hoarse laugh that he would finish him off. The main character put up his fist, and a moment later his fist crashed into Scar's face, forcing him to fly back and lose his footing. The hooligans called out to their boss with loud shouts, their voices echoing throughout the yard. Then he called out to those two and said that they didn't want to escalate the situation. And he said that they shouldn't show off either and advised them to pick up the two from the floor and leave. Watching them go, the man asked if the boss had let them go, even though they were clearly nervous about the questions. And Jian Shan calmly asked Peng if he had been fishing. After all, you can't hook the fish right away, you need to let the fish swim a bit. And they should go after Scar. They watched as the hooligans said goodbye to Scar and slowly walked away. The hero silently looked to make sure there was no one there, and he turned in the opposite direction. The man was surprised and said that he was on his way home and it was unclear where he was heading now. And if he sneaks, it means he's up to something and they should follow him. And it was unclear what the heroes were muttering through the car. They didn't understand and decided to watch what was happening a little longer. A moment later, a man got out of the car. The heroes opened the trunk, and their bodies obscured what was happening inside. But one thing was clear, there was something in the van. They threw a bag on the ground, which moved and moaned. Trouble is, it looks like they're about to leave. He asked Jian Shan what to do next, whether to continue watching or follow them, and suggested calling the police. The guy suddenly jumped up and said that it was the police and that everyone should not move. The heroes got nervous and said that they were cops and that it was unclear where they came from. And Scar was taken aback and said that we had to stop. He shouted that it was those two during the day and that they had already had enough. The man pulled out a knife and said that he couldn't get caught by the cops. He shouted that even if they were guards, they looked so angry, and that it didn't matter who they were, they needed to grab iron and chop. And it's not about the guards, but about what they are. These two fought with them during the day with 4 dragons. The man swung the knife with all his might, but Jianshan easily dodged and intercepted his hand. And then the heroes realized that they couldn't cope with them. The guy hit his opponent in the face, so that he began to fly away at a furious speed. Soon the man hit his back against the wall and hung his head. Scar shouted that he had warned me. A hand fell on his shoulder and he was addressed by name. The man asked if he was really planning to run away and said that it wouldn't do. In their circles, they say, "Don't abandon a comrade in trouble." Scar looked at him and said that trouble had already happened. When the hooligans were lying against the wall, the heroes finally approached the bag. The man untied the bag and told him not to worry. They would get him out soon. The main character was taken aback and said that it was the same. And what was he doing here? In front of them sat a tied-up Yang Tianli. How many years and how many winters had passed? The main character asked him how he had gotten to this point. Behind the barred door, one could hear that it was a sad story, and that when Yang Tianli's father was imprisoned. The house was foreclosed, he was kicked out of school, he was used to being a rich kid, and now he sleeps on the street. The boss continued that he was almost kidnapped today and that misfortunes never come alone. Then the main character asked what happened to Scar and his company. The man whispered that they were small fry and that they worked for money. The job was to transport goods to the Yunfeng warehouse area outside the city, and that's all they knew. Jianshan frowned and said that the Yunfeng warehouse area, he remembered, was the property of the Chen family. The policeman nodded and said that everything was correct. The documents were in order. It seemed to be a legal business, and there was no way to get to them without ironclad evidence. And he said that they would discuss the details in the office. He pointed to the map and told him to look here, and then he would understand everything. Then I noted the old town, the warehouse area. The protagonist was surprised and realized that they had created a hidden transport channel. And he asked Chief Dunn if, since they knew about the warehouses, it was possible to get a search warrant. The man became nervous and said that the guy was not aware of this, and that they had recently told him from above that the Chen family's affairs should be handled carefully. Jianshan thought about it and decided that some big shot was covering for this family. Or maybe this cunning old man is just pretending and doesn't want to quarrel with the Chens. The protagonist came up and whispered about the first demolition party in the old city, and he quietly asked if he made any money on this. The man began to stutter and blurted out that it was not right to do that and that it was ugly. The guy advised him to look at the bigger picture and said that if the Chens didn't intervene, further demolitions would bring in even more money. Picking up the card from the table, the protagonist noted that there was one condition, that they will be the ones to divide everything, and now the Chens are standing in their way. The boy reproached Chief Dunn for being content with crumbs. And was there a moment in his life when he wanted to risk everything? The man shouted that he would take it on, for the sake of justice, for the sake of the missing townspeople, and that he, Dunn, would not tolerate evil. The guy noted with a smile that this is exactly what he was expecting. Jianshan extended his hand and asked for official permission to assist the investigation, or he would change his mind. The boss replied that he couldn't change his mind, and he chuckled, saying that he simply didn't understand it right away. He added that his signature and seal were nothing, but Jianshan should be careful when investigating. After all, the Chen family are not angels. The main character grinned and calmly said that there was no need to worry, because after all, he was no angel either. It was a starry night outside. The cameras around the mansion were positioned in such a way that there were almost no blind spots, and the guards were on duty at the post all the time. The men noted that if they did not want to scare the animal away, then a frontal assault was not an option. Looking at the map, Jianshan said that there was an area near the electric fence next to a large tree. This section is copied from Chief Dong's map and the branches overhang, creating a dead zone for the cameras. Group A will infiltrate from there and will be responsible for shutting down the backup power supply and part of the surveillance lines. Jianshan and Peng will go through the drainage system where the rusty grate stood, and the group rushed forward at the head, with the guy setting the pace. Their steps were precise and synchronized. The two heroes were already standing at the door with chains and a lock. The man confidently brought a pair of massive pliers to the chain and, applying force, cut the metal. They opened the massive door and stepped inside, carrying a flashlight that immediately cut through the thick darkness. The boy suddenly caught a barely audible sound and looked up, quietly telling Pan that something was moving upstairs. Suddenly, a man's yawn echoed throughout the room. A colleague calmly pointed out that he should be quieter, otherwise the camera would notice that he was lounging around. The hero suggested that he didn't understand why all this was happening, and maybe they should quietly run off to the computer club. However, they received blows to the head from the heroes. While the protagonist was opening the door, Pan quietly asked him to be careful. The guy's gaze caught something terrible. There were many bars in front of them, and behind them were people. A man in a white coat shone a light into the prisoner's eyes. And the conclusion was one: this is not a warehouse at all. The man was indignant. It was so horrible. So many people were locked in. Peng was shocked and said that he didn't understand what the Chens were planning, and that it was as if they were setting up a concentration camp or even trafficking people. Qiansum noted that this is not just trading, and he continued just as coldly that this was a selection. The man did not understand and asked what selection meant. That is, the talk was about organ transplantation, and that was the Chen's business. These people, he said, were like sheep to the slaughter. Pan declared that they were beasts and that only a person completely devoid of conscience could have resorted to such vile actions. People needed to be saved. Taking out his phone, the guy told me to wait. After all, first they need evidence. Having filmed everything, the guy hinted that everything was ready, and now they can calmly burst in and save everyone. The workers screamed that someone had appeared and that they were trespassers. The guards barked briefly at the scoundrels who dared to disturb them and ordered the others to go and guard the documents. Jian Shan asked Peng to supervise everyone in white coats and preserve evidence. The workers shouted at them not to approach him and repeated that the documents should not be touched under any circumstances. The guard appeared from behind and told them to stand still, adding that their grandfather would not be allowed to cause trouble here. The man turned around abruptly. His movement was sharp and tense. He swung his leg and hit his opponent. The hooligans started shouting, demanding that they be grabbed and surrounded. Suddenly, the man noticed something and shouted to Jian Shan that workers began to destroy documents. The main character became very indignant and said that this couldn't be done. They needed proof. The guy shouted at Pan to hold on while he went to get the documents. The prisoners roared, asking if they had come to rescue them, and someone in despair begged to save him, repeating that he did not want to die yet. Then the guy shouted to Pan that they would return to the documents later, but first they needed to save people. He ordered everyone to be pulled out of here. Jianshan said at the station that this is the main thing, that the primary evidence on the warehouse area is collected here, including the place of confinement and the medical procedures described there, and fragments of documents hastily destroyed by them. The boss said that this time the guy seemed to have punched a hole in the sky and added that the Chens would not let it go. The protagonist grinned and said with a cheeky taunt that he was being a coward again. The man jumped up and said that he was not a coward, he was just cautious, but there was no turning back. Whether they managed to shed Chen's blood now all comes down to this. The next day, people in the yard were discussing how terrible it was, and that now they were afraid to go out at night. The man asked for the morning newspaper and asked what had happened. The old man could hardly hold back his tears and said that it was a great happiness. His son had disappeared a month ago and had finally returned home yesterday. The hero replied that he had definitely heard about the missing people recently and congratulated the boss. He said that if they wanted to know how his son disappeared, they should look at the front page. The man looked closely at the newspaper, and his face gradually changed, reflecting the growing tension. He couldn't understand how this was possible in broad daylight. Numerous cameras and microphones surrounded the deputy chief, Deputy Dong. The reporters from the Jiangcheng morning newspaper introduced themselves and asked about any progress on the warehouse case. The man asked them to calm down, said that he understood their concerns, and that the department was paying special attention to this matter. A special group has been created under his leadership, and the investigation will be carried out without any leniency. The journalist asked if the case was really related to the Chen family and what he could say about it. The hero replied that he could only say one thing. Whoever was behind this, they would be held accountable. He finished the sentence firmly. They represent justice. Against the backdrop of the sunset, a mansion was visible, its silhouette standing out against the orange sky. Chen was on the phone, apologizing to Uncle Liu and promising to resolve the situation, while Hu lay beaten on the floor nearby. He calmly said that there was no need to worry. The Chen family remembered the good, and then said goodbye. Then the guy hung up and thought for a moment, lost in his thoughts, and he turned his gaze further and calmly said that now it was his turn. The warehouses were checked, the entertainment center was sealed, and he noted that the guard dog had done an excellent job. Chen put his foot on his head and coldly asked Jin Hu if he knew how much they had lost. He became angry, believing that everything happened because of eavesdropping and the fact that his dog led the thieves home. He begged to give Jin Hu another chance. Chen looked at him angrily and remained silent. And then he said, "Okay, even a dog gets pitiful after a while." He continued that he was sad and suggested going for a walk along the embankment. Chen called the guards and told them to help Uncle Hu clean up neatly and tidy. And it's also worth replacing the carpet with a new one. A guard loomed suspiciously over the man. And after some time, the car drove up to the embankment where a downpour was roaring. A group of people swung a barrel, counting 1, 2, 3. And finally, the barrel flew into the sea. And under the great weight, it began to sink. Mr. Chen was informed that everything was ready. He replied from the car that he was tired. Chen ordered everyone to disperse and told the driver to take him home. They handed him a tablet and told him it was a recording from the warehouse's internal cameras. The guy looked closely at the recording and recognized a familiar figure. The hero chuckled and said that he remembered Jian Shan, noting that his name was Impudent. They figured out that a security company was registered to him. There is also a connection with the police, and they found that the raid on the warehouses was their work. The hero laughed strangely and frighteningly. I wonder if he thought it was small fry. But it turned out he was the one who got into this mess. Whether Jian Shan was a greenhorn or someone's pawn, he had still reached the end of his journey. And since he dared to fight the Chen family, he would pay for it.